Hello and welcome back to another lecture. In this lecture, we will write an Ansible playbook to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. This video is a continuation of this Ansible playlist. So before you complete this lecture, make sure you have watched the other videos in the playlist. On this channel, we have already learned how to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance using the management console. We also learned how to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance using Terraform. And in this lecture, we will learn how to install Jenkins using Ansible. To start, the first thing I always recommend is that you go to the documentation of whatever software you are trying to install. In this case, we are trying to install Jenkins, so we are going to look for the documentation on how to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. To look for the documentation, I'm going to open a new Google tab. And in the Google search box, I'm going to type how to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. Once you type how to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance, press enter. Under the Google search results, the first one is the Jenkins documentation, and we can see it says Jenkins on AWS. This looks like the documentation we are looking for, so select it. In this documentation, Jenkins on AWS, you can see that it is an instruction on how to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. So if you scroll down here, these are all the instructions on how to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. The first thing I'm going to take note of is the security group. So I'll scroll down here. In order to access Jenkins, you have to add a rule to the security group you will attach to the Jenkins server and open port 8080. So let's go to the management console and add that rule to our security group. I'll go to the management console and type EC2 in the search box. Select EC2 under Services. On the EC2 dashboard, scroll down and select Security Groups under Network and Security. The security group we will attach to the Jenkins server is the server security group we created in the previous lecture. Select it. Then select Inbound Rules. To see your inbound rules, you can scroll down here so you can see the rule. Then the next thing we are going to do is click Edit Inbound Rules and click Add Rule. We are going to add another rule on port 8080. So it is going to be custom TCP, and in here type 8080. Then under source, it is going to be from anywhere. So I want you to select this drop down and select anywhere on IPv4. Then click Save Rules. This is all we need to do to update our security group rule. Like I said, make sure you watch the previous video we did on Ansible because this video is a continuation of that video. Let's go back to the Jenkins documentation. In the Jenkins documentation, I'm going to scroll down here. And these are all the instructions on how to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. So if you want to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance, these are the commands you will run to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. And since we are going to write an Ansible playbook to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance, we will convert these commands into a language that Ansible understands. To write our Ansible playbook, the first thing I want you to do is open Visual Studio Code. Once you've opened Visual Studio Code, create a file in it. I'm going to double click anywhere in here to create a new file. Once you have created the file, you can select language here. And we will type YAML in here. Type YAML. Once you type YAML, select YAML. The reason why we are selecting YAML is because an Ansible playbook is always in YAML format. Once you've selected YAML, the next thing I want you to do is save this file anywhere on your computer. I'm going to click File and I'll select Save As. I'm going to save this file on my desktop and I'll call this file Install Jenkins. When you type the name of your file, make sure you type it in all lowercase and make sure there isn't a space between install and Jenkins. And you should also make sure that your extension is in YAML. You can see it says YAML here and click Save. Once you have saved the file, the next thing I want you to do is open the reference file I created for this lecture in this video's description. This is the reference file we will use to write our Ansible playbook. So what I want you to do is select everything in this file. I'll press Ctrl A to select everything. Right click to copy it. Then close that file and paste what you copied from that file in your playbook. Then scroll up. To start writing the Ansible playbook to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance, the next thing I'm going to do is dock this here and dock the documentation next to it. I'm going to scroll down here. Remember what I said earlier, that these are the commands we will use to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. An Ansible playbook is written in YAML format, so we have to convert these commands into a format that Ansible understands. When you write your Ansible playbook, which is written in YAML format, you always start with a 3- up here. Once you've entered the 3-, the first property is name, and this is the name we want to call the playbook. We will call this playbook Install Jenkins. Once you've given the playbook a name, the second property is host, and these are the EC2 instances we want to run this playbook on. So for the host, let's call it Jenkins Server. I will explain the reason why we are calling it Jenkins Server when we update our inventory file later on in this lecture. The next property is become. For become, we are going to type yes. The next property is become user, and the user we want to become is root. So here, type root. The next property is tags, and a tags is a list of commands we want to run on the playbook to install Jenkins. For example, these are the commands listed in the Jenkins documentation to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance, and these are the commands we will list under our tags. To convert these commands into a format that Ansible understands, you have to use the Ansible module. For example, the first command in the Jenkins documentation is using yum to update the packages on the EC2 instance. And in our Ansible playbook, we are using the yum Ansible module to update the packages on our EC2 instance. The second command in the Jenkins documentation is using Wget to add the Jenkins repo. And in our Ansible playbook, we are using the Ansible module getURL to do the same. So basically what I'm saying is, for every command you see here, you have to convert that command using Ansible module. If you want to know the Ansible module you need to use for each command, what I want you to do is look at the first word of each command. For example, for this first command, the first word is yum. For the second command, the first word is wget. For the third command, the first word is rpm. For the fourth command, the first word is Amazon Linux Extra. And for the fifth command, the first word is yum. So, for the first word you see in each command, this is what you will use to find the Ansible module. For example, for this first command, the first word is yum. So in Google, I'm going to type Ansible module yum. Once you type Ansible module yum, press enter. Under the search results, you will see the Ansible documentation. It says doc.ansible.com, and here you can see Ansible built-in yum module. Select it. And this is the Ansible module for yum. Anytime you are in the documentation, the first thing you want to check is to make sure that it is the latest version of the documentation. Once you have checked that it is the latest version of the documentation, the next thing you need to look at is the module name, and here you can see it says Ansible built-in yum module. And if you read it, it says manages packages with the Yum package manager. So we know this is exactly what we are looking for. And also what I want you to see is under the notes, for this module, you can use the short module name, which is Yum. So if you look in our Ansible playbook, we are using the short module name, which is Yum. Once you have found the Ansible module you are looking for, what I always do is scroll all the way down to the examples. So here, this is the examples that shows you how to use the Yum module. You can see for the first task, this Ansible module will install the latest version of Apache. And here, they have the name of the task, the module they are using, which is Yum. Then they have the perimeter name and state. If we scroll down here, you can see another example of the Ansible module Yum. And they are using this example to update all the packages on the EC2 instance. This is the example we want. So what I did is I copied this example into my Ansible playbook. For any of the perimeter you see here, name and state, if you don't understand what it means, you can scroll up to the perimeter section. Under perimeters, any value you see in the example will be listed here, and they are listed in alphabetical order. So if I go down, you should see name and state here. So I'm going to go down to N. Under N, you can see the name here, and it gives you a definition of what the name perimeter would do. And it also gives you some examples of the values that are accepted for name. If you scroll down to S, under S, you'll see state here, and it also gives you the definition and the accepted value for state. This is how you can interpret the Ansible documentation. I'm going to scroll down to the examples again. Under the examples, we want to update all the packages on our EC2 instance. And to update all the packages on our EC2 instance, for the perimeter name, we will enter quote with star in it. So in our Ansible playbook for Yum, to update all the packages on our EC2 instance, for the perimeter name, we will enter a quote and a star in it. Then the next perimeter is state. The state we will enter here is latest. This means that we want to update all the packages to the latest version. So type latest in here. Let's go back to the Jenkins documentation. The second command in the Jenkins documentation is using Wget to add the Jenkins repo. So what we have to do is we have to look for the Ansible module for Wget. So what you would do is come to Google again. I'm going to close the first one, and I'm going to type Ansible module Wget. Once you type Ansible module Wget, press enter. And it is usually the first result you get under your Google search results. Here you see docs.ansible.com, and the name of the module is ansible.builtin.getURL. I'm going to select it. Once you are in the documentation, make sure it is the latest version. Then you will see the module name here. You can see it is Ansible built-in getURL module. And if you read the definition, it says downloads files from HTTP, HTTPS, or FTP to the node. When they say the node, they are referring to the EC2 instance. And if you look under node, instead of using Ansible built-in getURL, we can use the short module name, which is getURL. That is what we are using in our Ansible playbook. Then let's scroll down to the examples. To use the getURL module, we are using two perimeters, which is URL and the destination. The URL is the address of where we want to download the file from the internet, and the destination is the directory on our EC2 instance where we want to download the file to. So if you look in our Ansible playbook, we have a URL and destination. So let's go back to the Jenkins documentation. In the Jenkins documentation for command number 2, you will see the URL here. So we'll copy the URL, copy it, and we will paste it here. So that you can see everything, I'm going to drag this out a little bit. The next parameter we need to enter is the destination. And you can see the destination here. So we'll copy this and paste it here. For the rest of the command in the Jenkins documentation, you will follow the same step we used for command number 1 and command number 2 to find the Ansible module for each command. If you also want to find the Ansible module in the documentation, what you can do is you can copy the module here and paste it in Google. Press enter. Under the search results, you can see it here, select it, and it will take you to the exact location of that module in the Ansible documentation. For this Ansible module, we are using 2 parameters. The first is state and the second is key. Let's go back to the Jenkins documentation. For the state, we are going to type present. And for the key, that is command number 3. We will copy everything from HTTPS all the way to the end. Copy it and paste it here. Once we have imported our key, according to the Jenkins documentation, we need to update our packages again. So we did that up here in our Ansible playbook. All we have to do is do the same thing here. To update all the packages on our EC2 instance, we are going to type quote and star in it. Then the state is going to be latest. Once we have updated our EC2 instance, the next thing we will do according to the Jenkins documentation is install Java. And this is the command to install Java. There isn't an Ansible module for Amazon Linux Extra. So what we have to do is run this command as a shell. So what we will do is copy this command. And if you look in our Ansible playbook, we are using the Ansible module shell. That means that we just want to run this command the same way you will run it on an EC2 instance. So I'll paste the command here. The next command will install Jenkins, and we are using yum to install it. So in our Ansible playbook, we are using the Ansible module yum. For the perimeter name, this is the name of the package you want to install. We want to install Jenkins, so I'm going to copy the name from here and paste it here on that name. And for the state, we want to install the latest version of Jenkins, so we will type latest in here. For the last 2 commands in the Jenkins documentation, the first command will ensure that Jenkins is always in the start mode anytime you reboot your EC2 instance, and command number 7 will start Jenkins. In our Ansible playbook, this Ansible module will do the same. The first parameter we have is enable. For the parameter enable, this is if we want the Jenkins server to always be in the start mode anytime we reboot our EC2 instance. We want it to always be in the start mode, so here we will type yes. For the next parameter name, this is the name of the package. The name of the package is Jenkins, so we are going to copy Jenkins here and paste it here. The last parameter is state, and we want to start the Jenkins service. So in here, we will type started. This is all we need to do to create the Ansible playbook that will install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. The next thing I want you to do is save your playbook. I'll select File and select Save All. For now, we will stop this lecture here. And in the part 2 of this lecture, we will run this playbook on our Ansible server to install Jenkins on an EC2 instance. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye.